think we are live on Facebook. Yes, we are. So good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our Tuesday, Bilateral Tuesday. It's the informal name of the conversations that we have each Tuesday with conversations about the relation with the donor states, Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein, especially with Norway and Iceland, and we're trying to, deconstruct a bit the information for Romanian organizations, but not only Romanian organizations, to better understand, this objective, a big objective of the EA and Norway grants in strengthening bilateral relations with the donor states. So welcome everyone, welcome Guri, welcome Hilde. I'm really pleased to have you in this conversation. And I hope we're going to have a good talk about what is bilateral relations, what are bilateral relations for the next hour. Before starting, really getting into the topic, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself. So not for me to introduce you, but to introduce yourself to our audience, which are live on Facebook. Guri, can you go first?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Guri Idsø Viken. I am a political advisor at Frivillighet Norge. I've worked there altogether almost 8.5 years, I think. But I had a break in between there, but where I worked somewhere else. Frivillighet Norge is, should I talk a bit about that as well?
You can tell us a bit about Frivillighet, yeah.
It is the Association of NGOs in Norway. So it helps promote the rights of NGOs in Norway and work for the economical and political conditions of all NGOs. We represent most of NGOs in Norway, like Red Cross, Church City Mission, People's Aid, the Sports Association, and the Helsinki Committee, and over 300 more. So,
Thank you. Hilde?
Hello, my name is Hilde, and I work as a communication advisor in the Norwegian Helsinki Committee. The Norwegian Helsinki Committee is a non-governmental human rights organization working to ensure human rights, that human rights are respected and practiced. We do this through monitoring, reporting, teaching, and also democratic support. Since the beginning or mid-2000s, NHG has been assigned the role as the contact point for the civil society in Norway and the 15 beneficiary countries under the Active Citizens Fund. So this means that we are keeping the Norwegian civil society informed about the EEA and Norway grants and the Active Citizens Fund. And we also assist in establishing contacts and cooperation between the non-governmental organizations in the beneficiary countries and in Norway. And we advise in the matter of to the civil society sector. So the overall aim is to strengthen and increase the bilateral cooperation between civil society in Norway and the beneficiary countries.
Mm-hmm. And because you already mentioned that you are the let's say official contact point for the Active Citizens Fund, you are also the official contact point for the previous NGO fund. How did this relation with the programs actually was developed by you, and how was the history behind it? How did you end up in a contact point? How was your experience with that?
Yes, it's a good question. It was before my time in the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, but I was told the story, so I'll try to retell it. So in Norway, we have a quite strong cooperation good cooperation between civil society and government. And the government, before having these new policies or new initiatives, they often invite civil society to hearings, either in form of written hearings or in form of oral hearings. And before the development of the program for 2004 to 2009, we were one of the organizations that were invited for the hearing for this development, and to speak our mind about what we thought about the program period. And at that point, actually, there weren't any funds earmarked for civil society. So this is actually one of the things that we said, that it needs to be some earmarked funds for civil society in the EEA and Norway grants. And the government took that really seriously, and they actually made these funds for civil society. And they also said that, okay, you got the idea, now you help us to do this. And we were really happy to contribute on that. So this is really interesting, because today, actually, the funds for civil society is one of the most important aspects and actions under the EEA Norway grants umbrella. And it also shows how important governmental hearings are, because it's established a contact and bilateral learning between civil society and governmental institutions, such as this program. So because civil society, it's a really clear idea that civil society should be independent and not controlled by any means by the government. It's also important that the funds for civil society are operated by the civil society itself through fund operators, and also that civil society organization serves as the contact point for the funds. So this is because civil society is definitely the best experts on civil society and itself. So this is a quite strong idea in Norway, and we've been really, really happy to serve as this contact point.
Thank you for that. It's good to hear a little bit about where did it come from, and it's good to know that it came from us, from the civil society sector. I was actually quite interesting, because, like, going a bit in the history about it, you have also, like, Norway has also a strong policy for cooperation aid, let's call it. And I would like to ask you, Guri, if I mean, how do you see it from your standpoint? So from Frivillighet Norge standpoint, how do you see the history of cooperation with other states, with, like, the Norwegian organizations with other states? So how they started to work there, why they started to work there?
Yeah, I guess the civil society organizations have more or less always been engaged internationally, in some ways, and most NGOs, CSOs, exist because they see a need in the society, and they are established to meet that need. And of course, needs don't stop at the borders. The needs for rights don't stop at the borders, and many needs are greater in other countries than in Norway. So many NGOs, they see the responsibility for meeting needs in society as an international task, and European task, and that has led to different kinds of initiatives, I guess. Like the aid organizations obviously work in countries where the need for aid is great, African countries, Asian countries, Latin American countries, and so on, and also some European countries to and fro. And then you have social organizations, for instance, that work with various kinds of immigrants, and that see that people come from other countries have needs that also needs to be met in that country. For when it comes to Romania, of course, there's also Roma people in Norway that have needs in Romania that needs to be met if they also should meet needs in Norway. So that's also a very, very clear reason for cooperating with Romanian organizations, for the social organizations. And then you have organizations that work with rights, like, for instance, LGBTIQ organizations, like QI, yeah, organizations that, of course, see that rights don't stop at the borders. if they need work for better rights for LGBT persons, then that also needs to be worked with in other countries than Norway, and people in Norway are also affected by their rights, either because they have partners from other countries, or they live in other countries, or they travel to other countries. So that's a very, I guess, an easy example to understand. But it is the same for women and for people with disabilities, people with various kinds of health issues, and so on and so forth. So that's also a reason for being engaged across borders.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, you asked how do I see it from Frivillighet Norge. I think that NGOs can be more engaged, and many different kind of NGOs are not so engaged and can be more engaged. And I think that's it's about learning from other countries, understanding other countries, and reaching out to vulnerable groups in Norway that are easily and more easily understood if they come to Norway and you understand their ways of living in the countries they came from, and also in terms of how you organize activities, and also in terms of people do things differently in other countries that can be a good way of doing it in Norway as well, whether you work with sports or environmental protection. So that's also something. And then the last thing I think is important is that Norwegian organizations see themselves as we are quite entitled. We are quite we have the rights we have. We get funding. We're in a good position, also democratically. And I think we don't always see what can be lost. And I think that's an important learning from countries that either have lost their rights or never had them in the first place. And that is also something the NGOs can learn, because if, like we see examples from USA or Poland now, how easily things that you take for granted can be lost. And I think that's also an important part of international cooperation, to see that.
I was just thinking that, like, as we know, let's say the Norwegian non-governmental sector is first of all, it's very membership based. So there are a lot of people in Norway are part of NGOs or structures of the civil society, let's call them. And they are also very, community based, let's say. So like getting around a certain interest or a certain need that that community has. And I was wondering how did the policies in Norway actually influenced several or different organizations to go international? Did they have a relation in that sense? It's a question for both of you, Guri and Hilde.
Yeah, it's a big question. I think it varies from field to field, and I mean field of our area of work, so to speak. And I think it also varies from organization to organization, really. But I can say that sometimes it's difficult in Norway because we're not a part of the EU. So we're not so informed about what happens in Europe and in EU as maybe you are in Romania. I feel that sometimes, in a way. Comparing myself to you and other colleagues in Romania, I see that you're more into the European community than we are. So that's an issue that not always makes NGOs so engaged in European questions.
I think for the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, we are quite abroad-oriented because we work on human rights issues, especially human rights in Europe and post-Soviet countries. So for us, the cooperation, we see definitely that having a strong cooperation between civil society in Europe is making civil society stronger, especially now with the developments in Europe where democracy is in decline, and where it's more important than ever that organizations stand together against undemocratic and authoritarian tendencies. So for us, we have a lot of sister organizations in different countries, and it's been really important to keep these contacts and also to have contact with other organizations all around. But we are quite international oriented, but I also know that in Norway there are a lot of organizations who are working on totally different issues and focusing on Norway, and they still need to have input from other organizations abroad to widen their horizon and to get new inputs. So even though you're working on quite national issues in Norway, you still want to look abroad for inspiration. And I think we have a lot to learn from each other there.
I guess a good example of that has been the COVID-19 situation. Now it's been valuable to see how they work with the rights of NGOs related to the COVID-19 situation in the EU and in European networks. And I think that's been a good example of what we can benefit from each other in terms of our needs and our demands.
Okay. I didn't think about the EU perspective until now. That's really interesting to see that, like, you're not, I mean, yes, you're not part of the European Union, but somehow you are connected to the European Union because of the Norway grants, basically. I mean, there is a cooperation for the economic area, at least. So I would have thought in my head that you are somehow connected to the European topics, but this is quite interesting to find out. And something else was popping in my head as a question is, like, do you like the organizations in Norway generally, not necessarily your organizations, but do the organizations in Norway get involved in EU programs?
It varies a lot. Some do and some don't. But I think the information about the possibility is not as high as other places. And the natural sort of impulse to reach out and see if there's funding, for instance, in EU is not as clear as it is in Romania, for instance. So I think that's a big difference. And I also think one of the interesting questions now has been that the EE grants has actually been able to interfere in the situation in Poland and Hungary through just stopping the funding because of the LGBT problems in Poland and because of everything in Hungary, I guess. And while EU has not been able to sanction in the same way, and I think that's another way of seeing that Norway is actually very engaged in European questions and has the means to do something about them. But I don't think the general Norwegian knows that. I don't think Norwegian people know how much we give. When I mention the sums of money we give to civil society, people are really surprised. They don't know that, and they don't know how much we actually are able to interfere in problems. They know about the problems. We talk about Hungary and Poland a lot in Norway, but they don't know about our ways of trying to solve them. We should be proud of that, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting because, like, this is something that we also not faced, but it was a conclusion or something that we noticed also from the previous NGO fund, that people in Norway don't necessarily know, like the citizen, not necessarily people who are engaged in organizations, but the general citizen doesn't necessarily know about the aid of Norway to other countries. Why do you think it's that? They don't get informed, or they don't care, or what would be the reason behind that?
Both, probably, to be honest. But I think the Norwegian media is really bad at writing about international or European questions. And we've had in Frivillighet Norge, because our engagement here now, we've had several debates about this together with the Helsinki Committee as well. And what the journalists that are actually engaged say is that Norwegian people tend to not read the articles about Europe, and especially if it's related to the EU, because we've had a lot of struggles related to whether we should be a part of the EU or not. And so it tends to stop there. And people are against the EU, so they don't want to hear about the EU. And people are against the EU, so they don't want to engage in European questions, which is a huge mistake, if you ask me. But that's the situation here, and we need to be honest about it in order to do something about it, I think.
But at the same time, I think also we see a younger generation who is really interested in about what's happening abroad, and especially youth organizations are having a lot of initiatives abroad. So the EU debate has been sparked a bit again, and the younger generation is definitely on this. I think they feel a bit more European than the previous generations, and that is an interesting tendencies. But but definitely you will have people in Norway who are more concerned about their issues in Norway when it comes to salaries and local issues. So that's always a thing when you're focused on your own. It's hard to see a bit what's happening outside. But that's one thing that we are trying to do as a contact point. That is one of the things that are in our mission, to try to communicate the Norwegian benefits of the EEA grants. And we definitely see that there are huge benefits also in Norway, that the money doesn't really just go abroad. We see a lot of things happening in Norway, that civil society is also developing in Norway on this cooperation and are learning a lot of new things. So in terms of COVID, as Guri talked about, the Norwegian organizations are quite entitled. We have a lot of funding already, both for working in Norway but also for working abroad, and this is might be why we don't look to so much to international funding and European funding. But I think now it's a challenge, because there's a lot of organization who has economical problems because of the COVID, because of their activities is going down, and they get less funding because they have less activities. And therefore Norwegian organizations need to find new ways to get money. And this is something that organizations in Europe have been doing for so long, because you haven't been that entitled and got all this money from the government. So we really need to look to other organizations abroad to get new inspiration and ideas on how to get alternative funding, because we see especially Corona times have given us some new challenges, and we need to get some ideas from you.
And I must say I agree with that, and I must say I am a bit concerned at the moment when it comes to international relations, because of course people engage more in international relations when they travel more, when they see problems, when they meet people, when they talk to people who are highly competent in Romania, for instance, and see that we have something to learn from them. And when that travel doesn't happen, I'm afraid people don't see problems, and I'm afraid that people, when they don't meet, they care less, which is natural, but also very concerning. So I think it's important to find new ways to keep that up.
We're also a bit concerned about the cooperation. We see that a lot of project goes as planned, but we're a bit afraid of not having too many new projects, because as Guri said, when you don't meet new people, it's harder to establish cooperation. So now we only meet digital, and it's harder to to only meet through a screen to build trust, because going into a corporation you need to have quite a lot of trust, and we always recommend the organizations to visit each other in the different countries. And now traveling is harder, so it is harder to gain this trust and to establish a lot of contact. So now we need to think in new ways on how to establish new partnership and how to get this contact and trust, even though we can't really travel and see each other in person.
And also that we need to find a way to engage the informal dialogue, because so often things grow out of the informal dialogue that you have in a coffee break or in an airport, sitting next to someone which you never sit next to now, and just talking to the waiter at the restaurant who also happens to be engaged in something that you are engaged in, and so on and so forth. And all that informal dialogue is now lost. So I think that's also important to find ways, which we have been working on in the Active Citizen Fund Romania now, and I think we need to work more on that, because
I was writing here, Hilde, you started to talk about benefits of the bilateral relations, and you already mentioned quite a few times, both of you, the learning from each other part. You also mentioned, Hilde, the funding from other sources. What would you say you can sell, let's say, to Norwegian organizations as a benefit from cooperating, not necessarily with Romania, I'm talking about with all the 15 beneficiary countries involved in the Active Citizens Fund? What would you say to them that's benefiting them, for example?
Okay, I'll give you some good examples. First, I think when we see good cooperation and successful bilateral projects, we see that in these projects they get successful because organizations that are involved they have an equal approach. So there's not like top down, that one organization is going to teach the other one and the other one is just listening and learning. It is mutual. And they have each equal approach to the learning process, and that is quite important. And we see that this is really possible. It is possible to have organizations learning from each other. So one example that I like to talk about is the Diabetes Association in Norway. I had a cooperation with the Diabetes Association in Latvia. And they had a project where they wanted to exchange best practice and know-how. And when the Norwegian organizations went to Latvia, they found that in Latvia they had come much further in their work with the next kind, with working with family and relatives and so on. And therefore they have developed a handbook to show on this work. And that was the Norwegian organization hadn't been focusing so much on the next kind. They only focused on their members. So they actually adopted this handbook and translated it to Norwegian and adopted it into Norway. And that is a really good example to show that even though the Norwegian organization have been functioning really well and doing a lot of good work in Norway, they haven't had this focus before. And by going to Latvia, visiting and seeing the Latvian diabetes organization and how they work, they saw that, oh, they actually have a focus that we haven't thought about before. So this broadened and gave them some new ideas. Another example from my own organization and Romania actually is that the NHC has been, Norwegian Helsinki Committee has been contributing to a study on how decisions from the European Court of Human Rights are implemented in Norway. And after the study in Norway, there was a corporate study in Romania, a comparative study in Romania. So for the NHC, it has been important. It's not that the study in Romania gave so much input to the Norwegian study. It's more that strengthening our cooperation with on human rights with other organizations, and especially our Romanian sister organization, has shown that there could be so much more than the project itself. So you need to think about outside the project and trying to create long-lasting friendship and networks across countries that are going beyond the project scope and the project timeframe. So, so we definitely have a lot of more cooperation now with our sister organization because of this this one project.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's a good thing that there is actually. You think that Norwegian organizations, that Norway is quite well functioning, and everything is so good, but we actually do have a lot of challenges in Norway, and the Norwegian civil society also have challenges. And we definitely could look abroad, as I said, when it comes to COVID-19, to get new ideas for funding and other things. So we definitely see that the civil society organization who has been involved already, they speak quite highly and positively about the cooperation that they have been involved in. And that is really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Guri, can you share something with us about these benefits, or
I on a more general level, I think that a well-functioning civil society is key to a well-functioning democracy, and that is important, not only in Norway but in Europe as well. And I think the way to develop a well-functioning civil society is to fund it and work with it, and help each other make the organizations work and play our part in it. So in that way, I think that's like the big reason for having bilateral relations and for having civil society organizations. And then I also think what Hilde said, it's important to understand each other's capacity and knowledge. I think it's important that the Norwegian organizations don't see themselves as helping the Romanian organizations. I think it's therefore important that the Romanian organizations or organizations from other countries actually are really clear on what their competence is and how they can contribute in a project. And they shouldn't be afraid of talking about that, because I've met a lot of really competent people in the Romanian NGOs, and I think they have a lot to learn the Norwegian NGOs.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the Norwegian NGOs are built on a tradition that is really long, and they have functioned really well for a long time, and their sort of knowledge that they have built on and given each other is also a knowledge that we can share with organizations in Romania.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an understanding of how the NGOs work that is built on a longer history than most Romanian NGOs, and we should share that with Romanian NGOs. So I think that's also an important thing. But I also think, we carry with us a lot of prejudice when we meet each other, and I think that makes us lose some opportunities that we could have if we met each other with a more open mind and understood each other better. And especially when I meet in Norwegian NGOs, is that they think all Romanian NGOs only work with Roma people and only have capacity related to Roma people, which is of course an important capacity for the Norwegian NGOs. But there are so many other things, and I think to be clear on that as well, that you don't have to be specifically interested in Roma questions in order to cooperate with a Romanian organization. So that's one, and I think there are several others. You need so just to show each other what we can and how we do things important.
Mm-hmm.
And of
Because
course, another one from Romanian organizations is often that all Norwegians have a lot of money and are more entitled and have a free flow of money from the government, which is also wrong. And we also have social problems in Norway, and that we need to tackle the same way as you do in Romania. So that's also one.
Because you were saying about Roma, I was also wondering if there are certain topics, certain thematics of organizations from Norway that are more, how do you say, plausible. They're more, you know, they can be a more directed towards international context, let's say. Because like I understand the Roma topic, which is important for some of the organizations, and they are looking for organizations from Romania or other countries, because it's not only Romania has this expertise, but also other from the beneficiary countries. But if there is another area in which organizations are, you know, looking at from a bilateral perspective more than other topics.
A specific area in Romania, you mean, or?
In general, not necessarily in Romania. In general, if they, for example, if environmental organizations are more interested in bilateral cooperation more than, I don't know, the scuba diving clubs.
Yeah, I think environment is a big question in Norway because of our oil activities. We have strong environmental organizations that are opposed to that. So that's one thing, to reach out to them in a way that's could be great. They are really good NGOs and professional and strong NGOs. If they see a specific interest in Romania, I don't know. They could, but I think they are more concerned about different countries, not necessarily one specific one. But they have a lot of interest, of course, so it could be interesting. And
yeah, I also
Oh,
sorry. Go. I also don't know if there's any, like, if there's one topic that is more interesting to go abroad with than others. But we see that, yeah, definitely climate and climate change has an international perspective, definitely. But also things that, like, working with children and youth. We see a lot of organizations working on the empowerment of youth, and civic education is something that is quite cross country. But especially organizations working internationally already with democracy, active citizenship, and good governance and human rights. They already have a quite national perspective, and is looking for that. But we also see organizations that don't have this international perspective in their work already, who are interested in learning from others. So the topic doesn't really narrow it down to whether you will have a good project or not. It's it's other things that are more interesting.
I was actually asking this question because from our experience, also from this fund, also from the next from the last fund, from the NGO fund, we have, I mean, let's say that a big percentage of partnerships that were good and sustainable and continued after the project and stuff like that. So as a general definition of good, were more into the social field, not necessarily anything else. Of course, we had also some very good partnership projects with other fields, but like on a higher percentage, there was this the theme of social field, let's say social services, rights protection, stuff like that. And I was of course, it's sort of normal, let's say, that methodologies that are connected directly with the work with beneficiaries with different disadvantages, let's say, is more, it's easier to take, to implement, to talk about, to pilot, or whatever. But then again, when you are talking about, and this was something that was quite well, a debate at some point with the partnership, with the bilateral partnerships, when you talk about, I don't know, active citizenship, or when you talk about the relation with the public authority. Romania and Norway, for example, are very, very far away from each other in this regard. So like methodologies related to how to communicate with the public authority may very, very differ from Norway to Romania. So maybe methodologies in that sense, from those areas, are harder to take and to implement here. And that's why actually I addressed the question, because like from our experience, there is a very large focus on social issues that are brought up in partnerships. And it's good to hear that like organizations in Norway are not necessarily, stuck, let's say, on specific topics for bilateral cooperation. Basically, this is what
I think one of the most important things to understand about Norwegian NGOs is that they have emerged from a need. They have seen something that needs to be solved, and they are working to solve it, and their members and funders are measuring them when in terms of whether they reach their goals or not. So the Norwegian NGOs will never do anything that goes against their mission. Their mission is the most important. So if they are asked to take part in something, and say someone calls them and says, we will give you a lot of money if you take part in this project, the NGO will say no. But if someone call them and say, oh, we see that you work on this specific topic and we have a project that is related to that topic and can help solve it somehow, then the NGO is likely to say yes. And that is very important about them. And I know there's a difference there. Some NGOs are desperate for funding and will adjust their area of work to the funding. This will not happen in Norway, almost never, because they have members who expect them to work on the issues they have voted for them to work on. And so
and they're also like giving money for that, like the membership fees.
Yeah, of course, they are also paying for it. Yeah.
Yeah, when you get project money, you apply for a project to be working on that specific area. So you want to you want to work on that area. But I think you both are into something really important here, and it's a strategic choice, because you can't really work on everything. And if you all you want to have a staff that is competent in what you work with. So if you have projects that are so wide and so different, you won't be able to do it as good as if you're focusing on one area and you do that really well. And I think because there is a lot of, it's a wide civil society in Norway, all organizations are trying to find their added value and to find where is the room for what is no one else doing, and what can we be experts on that no one else is an expert on. So you don't need all these organizations who are big and general to do everything. You can also have the smaller ones who are focusing on their issue, and you see that both the smaller one and the big one is quite true to their mission, as Guri is saying, that they won't just jump on an opportunity because there is money involved, because money is not always the biggest issue. It's more about capacity and knowledge and these type of things.
And there's also like the Norwegian people expect the organizations to work on what they say they work on. And if you see any critical stories in the media about NGOs, it's usually because the money is spent on something else than what they say. So it's that's a really important ethical issue in Norway.
Yeah.
Mm.
And because we were at this topic, I also wanted to address something like, okay, we are talking about Norway right now, of course, but also Iceland is a little bit in the same situation. I'm not talking also about Liechtenstein, which is even smaller. So it's like, but there are 15 beneficiary states that are involved in the Active Citizens Fund, and I wouldn't even dare to count the number of organizations that could apply for the fund from the 15 beneficiary states, and they all come to Norway, which has a limited amount of organizations, and not all of them can be involved in all the projects that could be developed under the fund, and not necessarily Active Citizens Fund, because the EA grants is like it's larger in its funding. So there is a lot of competition basically for Norwegian organizations, especially. Um, what do you think catches the attention of Norwegian organizations so that they could be persuaded, motivated to go into partnership projects? Because we already talked about this connection with their mission. So this is one topic, I would assume. But do you think there are other, um, things, yeah, that could catch their attention more easily, of course?
I think, yeah, and building on what we said, I think it's important to not just send out a general email to 100 organizations with the same request, but to actually do research on the NGO that you contact. They usually have pages in English saying very clearly what they work on, and try to explain to them why the project that you are proposing will meet their needs. And I think that's Norwegian NGOs are very to the point. That makes us not always seem so polite when talking to English or Romanian people, because they use a lot of phrases and a lot of words. Norwegians don't do that. But we are, when we get an email, we want to see, what is this email about? What are they asking us to do? What do they expect from us if we take part in the project? And how can we benefit from it? And they want to see that in 5 sentences, more or less. So I think that's really important, to be to the point and explain what you want to do, and how this will be interesting to the NGOs that you are contacting. And that is sort of the Romanian NGOs sales job, if you could say that. And that's, I think, also because many Romanian NGOs with very good intentions are really open in their requests, because they want to make a room for the Norwegian NGOs to also help develop the project. But I think sometimes it can be too open, and then it's quite hard to ask to go to your board or your leader and say, oh, I have this request to take part in something in Romania. But it's more easy to say, oh, this Romanian NGO has this project that's about young people and the environment, scuba diving, and that's and they are asking if we want to take part in that project with this sort of effort. And then that's an easier request for them. And still the Norwegian NGO can help develop the project afterwards, but it's easier if it's a clear request, I think.
And I think Norwegian organizations will look quite easily if this is a professional organization and a professional question as well. So you need to be professional in all steps from the contact, show that you have really read and understand the organization and their values, and that this project is in the values to the product that you are proposing. So I think we see that projects who have organizations who have common understanding of the important values, not only for the project itself, but also for the organizations, that the two organizations who are cooperating have a common understanding about what their values are, then it's the higher chance that the project will be successful. and also common understanding of the content and strategy that you are working on. So you need to keep the contact all in the process. So if you have been able to sell yourself in there and establish a partnership, don't leave it. You need to still be working on the partnership, but definitely also be early. We see a lot of organizations sending requests for project partnership just days or weeks before the deadline, and that is way too late. It needs to be a long time before. So start planning a lot earlier. And Norwegian organizations will never go into a cooperation if it's only weeks until the deadline. So because there is a lot of, it's both because of the professionality that there is a lot of possibility for cooperation, and we won't go into projects that we don't really believe in. And if it's a rush, it seems like this is not going too well. But also there is a lot of democratic function is in the organization. You need to take it to the board. You need to go through the democratic processes in the organization itself, and that takes time. So that is one thing you also need to be really ahead of.
I think that's important as well, and also just to make the person that you contact confident that you are contacting him or her, especially because you want to cooperate with him or her. Because if you send out an email that looks like it could be sent to anyone in Norway, then that won't raise their interest in the same way, and it won't build on their trust that this is actually something you want. It might even seem like a request to just have someone sign something so you can get some money. And that's a really bad situation if you end up with that. So I think that's key.
So it's good to have an idea about the project and what you want to do, but also we see that good bilateral cooperation is also when both organizations are able to develop the project together. So if you come with a fixed, finished project, it might be looking, as Guri said, like you just need the stamp, you just need the signature, and then it's good. But Norwegian organizations actually want to be a part of the project planning and the development of the project. So you don't need a fixed, finished project and everything ready. You can also have a really good idea and show that this is how you want to do this, but you're also really open to have a good cooperation where you both are equal in the project. Also, it's when you first have the project, it's really important to think about the financial framework, to think about the budget and to agree upon every budget post. We see that there is a lot of confusion and misunderstanding when it comes to this type of things. It needs to be a really common understanding about what the financial framework and agreement is about, and that will create less conflict if you have this, if you have worked thoroughly on this. And remember that things are much more expensive in Norway. And also Norwegian organizations is a bit, they don't want to ask for too much money to cover their costs, because they know that you need to cover a lot of costs in Romania, so and other countries. So they will be a bit humble in this, but you need to make sure that you have enough money to cover the costs in Norway, because the costs are actually quite high in Norway.
Yeah. Going a little bit further and approaching our 1 hour meeting, let's say everything is fine and the project is already financed and you have a Norwegian organization on board and everything is settled. What would your tips and tricks, do's and don'ts for Romanian organizations in actual cooperation, you know, like when you are having a cooperation with Norwegian organizations, from, of course, from your own point of view, but also from the point of view organizations that you work with, basically?
I think it's important to,
No, Guri, you go ahead.
Okay, I think it's important to stick to your plan and keep each other informed of what you're doing. I think that's also very important to have meetings and keep each other in the loop, sort of, and know what's going on, and to discuss with each other what to do. I think Norwegian organizations want to know what they are part of. Hilde,
yeah, I think we have been talking a bit about this already. Be prepared, know as much as possible about the program and the call, and understand what is the call and the program about, and also about the organization. Make sure that you get to know each other really, really well. It takes time to build partnership and trust. I get told all the time that there's no shortcuts in confidence work, in building trust. So don't try to take the shortcuts because they don't work. So use your time to build the trust that you need, and also be early when it comes to building trust. For example, we see that visiting organizations in the partner country is important. It's hard now with Corona, but it's important to invite a Norwegian partner to Romania to get them to see what is the challenges on the ground, and to also then they will actually have a mind what will actually they need to contribute to the project. It is a bit harder when you're sitting digitally and only sitting in Norway, not really knowing too much about the country. So don't take for granted that the Norwegian organization already know everything about Romania. Invite them over. It's a big part of the learning process to actually visit the country, and also vice versa. So again, I want to stress this point about making sure that the financial basis is taking to the project. This is important for the successful completion, to have enough funds for every budget post, to make sure that you have enough time and resources for the project administration. This is one thing we see that organization might underestimate, that administration is not that that important as activity, but actually project administration is really important, so don't underestimate that. And also last, building good sustainable relations outside, like for a longer time than the project itself. So trying to build partnerships that could last when the project is finished, and to have something extra when the project is finished. That is a good thing, to have this long-term perspective. I think that we see that organizations who have this have a better success in their projects.
And also, maybe just if I can add something, that it's important to remember that we are all humans that are motivated by human needs. And many of us that work in NGOs, we love to learn. So help people learn new things, and also don't underestimate the value of the social contacts. And make room for having dinners together and doing social things together that will help build trust, because you get to know each other.
What would be the #1 drink for a Norwegian?
A drink?
Yeah.
It's really hard. We drink a lot of beer in Norway. It's so expensive.
Yeah, I think we drink everything.
Yeah. And aquavit, we have our own spirit. It's called aquavit, which is really highly refined and really good. The Norwegian aquavit. It's very good.
Okay, so like a spirit. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could do that. We also have spirit.
Yeah.
So that people can understand what to bring with them if they go to Norway and to a family dinner or a networking dinner. So that to better get acquainted, let's say.
Well, I would prefer Romanian wine. I think the Romanian red wine is always welcome in my house.
Good. Well, thank you very much for this discussion. I hope it was good for people watching. We will also post it on our pages, so people can look at it, or people who did not see it to look at it. Thank you very much, Hilde. Thank you very much, Guri, for the insights. I think they're valuable to organizations to better understand a little bit better the context in which a partnership can be developed. and some ideas that they could take into consideration for future partnerships. Yeah, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good week, and hopefully we have good bilateral projects that we can brag about in the future.
Yes, I forgot to tell you that, of course, if you want to have projects, you also should register to our database. So it's you can just go to our webpage, ngo.norway.org, and then you will be able to register for. Then it will be easier for Norwegian organizations to find you in the database, and also Romanian organizations can search for Norwegian organization in this database. So we have a lot of information online. So if this wasn't enough information for you, you will find a lot of information on the webpage.
And for us, of course, you can always contact us at the Civil Society Development Foundation if you want or you are interested in a partner from Norway, Iceland, or Liechtenstein. We can help out, of course. That's why we are here. Good. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.